Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us on this Saturday morning. We just started recording of this session on bridging the skills gap. I warmly welcome everyone, including our alumnus expert for today, Harb. Harb, it's a pleasure having you with us. I'll just give a small overview of who you are. Harb is a Senior Director Education, Microsoft Middle East and Africa. He currently leads Microsoft Education business for the Middle East and Africa, of course. He's based in the United Arab Emirates, yet he's joining us this morning from Lebanon. He works closely with various countries to ensure successful adoption of 21st century education tools and solutions. He has an innovative professional. He's an innovative professional with 25 years of progressive experience in the IT industry and the skills to drive business growth, capitalize on new revenue potential, and of course, manage all aspects of daily business operations. He has served in and supported many countries in Africa, in the Middle East, and I believe in what do you call it? The total region, Harb, with Afghanistan and all of those countries.
Yeah. So we have part of this Indian subcontinent, like Afghanistan, okay, Pakistan, and Iraq included part. But currently, given the situation, security situation, and since 2014 was the last time I went to Iraq, Afghanistan. Pakistan, no, it's safe. So we're still going back and forth to Pakistan till today.
Cool. Yeah. So to set a little bit the stage for the topic of skill gap, a recent article in Forbes lists most critical soft and hard skills that organizations are hiring and training for in 2020. The article was released in April of this year, and it was based on the recently released LinkedIn Learning 2020 Workplace Learning that we had discussed previously. Among the top 10 skills in terms of the soft skills was creativity, collaboration, emotional intelligence, and communications, and others. While from the top hard skills, we really have the new comers of the tech words like cloud computing, UX design, like the user experience design, artificial intelligence, blockchain, affiliate marketing, and others. So we're happy today to host you with us so you can lead us through more in-depth on the topic of skills gap in an effort of sharing and providing our alumni and our senior students with more information on the topic so they also know where they need to move their direction in order to stay within the market needs, the job market needs. So without any further ado, Harb, I leave this floor for you, and I welcome again our alumni and our students. And
okay, thank you, Nasreen. And good morning, everyone. I'm gonna start just by laying the agenda quickly on the bullet point I'm gonna run through. I would like to invite anyone to interrupt me for a question so that we make the presentation interactive. Otherwise, it becomes dull me just reading through the presentation to you. So feel free anytime to interrupt if you have any questions or anything that's not clear on the slide. I'll be going through. More than happy to address them. I'm gonna start by addressing first the literature on the 21st century skill, and then I'm gonna move into how the learning has changed, and then how the work environment has changed, and then I'm gonna share with you some statistics both in the southern and northern hemisphere on how the skill shortage is affecting both hemispheres. And then I'm gonna share with you some numbers in terms of economic growth. So how the skills shortage or gap is affecting economy directly and the GDP. And then Some statistic run by some research house, including Microsoft, PwC, and McKinsey. It's good to put number. It gives you a perspective, a tangible perspective on what I'm talking about in this presentation. And then I'm gonna move into addressing the needs of social soft skills or socio-emotional skills, also on top of the technology skills. So everyone is aware of the tremendous advancement in technology, and then we're seeing this in our daily life. And then a new word has been invented just to describe that blurring line between the physical and the digital world, and we call it phygital. So whenever you hear the term phygital, this is that the blurring line between, or the mesh between the physical and digital is very blurring, and that's hence we call it phygital. So how learning has changed is we see that it's a race between learning and technology. As we see that technology is advancing at a very, very high speed, whereas learning is trying to catch up. And hence, that's impacting the shortage and the skill gap. We know that a new intelligent system and the machine reshaped the nature of work and people. And this also has impacted the modern workplace. We see that technology has entirely reshaped the organization. So it allowed for a better communication across group collaboration. It allowed more streamlining of the business processes of the organization. Hence, it allowed more time for the business to focus on their goal, which basically business growth and more profit for shareholder. But what also changed in the modern workplace is the way, especially big corporation, is the way they're looking on what I mentioned in the chat before we started the presentation is the lifelong learning. So now every worker is required to acquire more skill than basically his diploma. So if I have an engineer or if I have an art graduate, is not enough to be an expert in the engineering field I've studied or in the art course I took or graduated. It's very important also to acquire a new skill, and we'll talk about this later. In terms of economic impact, so the numbers of the impact in terms of trillions of dollars, not billion, we're talking here trillions of dollars of what the digital work could contribute to the GDP is huge. It varies, but this number by 2028, you're anticipating that it will be $11.5 trillion. So this is a huge. And then the amount of augmentation, I will talk later about augmentation and automation and the difference between both in terms of impact. Here we see is we have the two hemisphere, the southern and the western hemisphere. And the in the northern and the southern. And the northern we say is basically the baby boomers are going into retirement, and especially in the West between Europe and the US and Canada. And this is creating a huge shortage of skills. Even the immigration influx we see into those countries is still not enough to close the shortage in skills. And you see this, the huge amount of shortage in skill, you see them in red. Medium talented you go. If you go into the southern, it's a different issue. So the birth rate is high, population is keep increasing and also is high. But what we see there is, despite the high number of youth, is the lack of quality skill is absent. So opposite to the northern hemisphere, the southern has a lot of people, but it's short. It's in short of quality of skills. And this can give you an idea on the world map is how crucial and how really is important. If I look at Africa, there is a PwC research paper has been done in 2018 that says that 96% of the CEOs in South Africa of the business in South, not in South Africa, across the African continent, are not confident about the future of the business, because they say in order for there to execute on their business plan and develop and grow their businesses, they need talent. And they currently, Africa is really in need. It has a huge gap in terms of talent. And they're worried about the future of their businesses. Now, most of the job, no exception, usually technology was only for those that study computer science, computer engineering, and the rest of the student in university were a little bit away from technology. Now more and more a job, and this statistic is done by the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, not showing on my slide. They're saying today 50% of any job requires technical skills, and the next 10 years they're anticipating a 77% of skill requirement. Now what you see here is some stats, just at least 133 million euro generated will be the cause of this division, what we call division of labor between humans and machine by 2022. But this is not a bleak picture I see. From what I'm reading, and I have read over the last 3 years, is that, for example, in UK, they say around 7 million job will be impacted by the artificial intelligence, but also artificial intelligence will create much more than the 7 million job. And hence is here is a huge challenge for government and for academia also to make sure, especially corporation, is how they can upskill their worker and not to leave any worker left behind, especially those that are senior in age, or those that they have small businesses and cannot afford, like big corporation, to do the proper training for their workforce. The 375 million people will need to switch from work, and this is basically is also here the skilling, and this study was done by jointly by McKinsey and Microsoft. Unless really corporation and government are aware of this, then this might create some negative impact on people that they're not skilling and will not be skilling themselves. Here, what this slide is saying is basically this research took 10 clusters of job, and they look of what, for every cluster, what will be automated and what will be augmented. And they, across those 10 clusters of occupation, they found that 51% could be augmented and 38% will be automated, not could be, will be automated. So if we look at science and engineering, 74% will be augmented, the job, which is positive. You see science engineering is still increasing and high demand for the skills there. And only 18% will be automated. If we go down to empathy and support here I mean by like nurses, psychiatrists, and the likes, 64 will be augmented and then only 23% automated. So if we look at those across those 10 clusters, we see that the management and leadership is there, technical maintenance is there. And you see how it drops from number 1 to number 10. Physical labor, only 31 will be augmented, 66 will be automated. And this is where we look, okay, so we know that this point needs some skilling here in order to bridge that gap, because 66% of will be automated and it has to move somewhere else, then we need, and this is can tell governments and corporations where they need to focus their upskilling for their staff.
Harb,
Yes.
may I ask a
Sure.
question? What you mean with augmented is that there will be a higher need for science and engineering with that 74%. And while that need is growing, 18% of the skills that someone who is working in science and engineering or major in science and engineering would need to have tech or hard skills that are more IT. And could you just elaborate a little bit on the difference in concept?
Yeah, sure. For example, if I take science and engineering, 80% will say will be automated. This has nothing to do with the upskilling. This is what this slide is saying, is that science and engineering will be on high demand. Skilling definitely is needed, but the skilling probably not in terms of science or engineer only. It's also in terms of soft skill. I have a slide on those soft skill I'm gonna talk about. But the 18% automation, I'll give you an example. For example, if a company is doing its forecasting, usually what happens is to do the forecast and come up with a forecast, CFO or finance will work for a few weeks or a month in order to come up with a certain forecast for the company. Let's say I work as a salesperson in the company and I'm gonna get my target for the next quarter. Usually finance has to sit and do some exercise, manual exercise or on Excel sheet in order to reach out for that forecast. What happens now is giving the machine learning and the AI, that task can be automated.
Okay.
Right? And then in my forecast, first I will decrease the number of days or weeks that finance need to work on this task, right? And in that sense, the augmentation becomes to finance that they can free sometimes work on other stuff, augment their productivity while automating the others. You know? So this is one aspect of that slide. Another aspect is also these jobs will be on high demand. I'll show, I think the next slide or two, it will show also the job demand requirement and how it's spread. So from that, what my machine learning is an automation, but for machine learning also you need some skill to learn. You need people that will work on those skills, learn those skills in order to be able to do that machine learning.
To upgrade themselves in a way within certain skills or advanced apps or technologies that are now more relevant to the current needs.
Yeah. And also, by augmentation is not only increase in those occupations, but what happens is, as I said, it frees your time to focus on some other tasks. So now when you automate some of the tasks, the other, but definitely this requires some skilling. You cannot achieve that relation between augmentation and automation unless you do the proper skillings.
Okay, clear. Thank you.
This one, what shows is negative impact on economy in case governments and corporations do not take the skill seriously. If we take, for example, China, we know China now is like the world leader in terms of industry, a huge industry country. If you take the impact, if skill gap is not addressed properly, this can impact, if you look at the second column from the right, is 1.7% points on the GDP or on the growth. So this is in terms of pure dollar, this is $5.4 billion. So that's a huge number impact on GDP. If we take even the US, you will see it's $975 billion impact. It's a 0.4% points impact on GDP. So what we're when we talk about filling that skills gap, how important it is, this number can give you a reality of how big is the impact on every economy, right? And we're talking here about the G20 only, right? It's not mapping the whole world. It's taking the G20 countries in terms of impact. And even if you go to the lowest 0.5, in Australia is 25 million population, and the impact is $113 billion. Yeah. And if we know what $113 billion is, the ruin we are in Lebanon now because of this number, right? That has evaporated.
Let's not do that linking. Let's stay positive. I have a question in regards to the percentages. So the lowest the percentage, it means that the current workforce in those countries is much more skilled than others.
Yes.
Can you create that correlation? Okay.
It's 100% true. We see in Australia, the number of the skill gap in Australia is very low. If you take it outside of its region, because it's in the Asia Pac region, it's usually the number of skilled worker is very high in Australia.
So among the G20, more the developing countries are the ones that are gonna be more impacted by the skills thing. Okay. Nice, interesting.
And Australia, by the way, in terms of education, with Singapore and Australia, we see they are leading in terms of education worldwide. And Singapore, Australia, in terms of educations, one of the best countries in the world, including Finland. And if I look at Europe, I see Finland in Europe, but then you go to APAC, you'll find Singapore and Australia also leading there. Much better than the US. It's surprising.
What are the criteria that would lead you to evaluate that they're doing much better in higher education?
It's just vision at the top, honestly. It's vision and execution at the top. It all boils down to that. Either you have a visionary leadership or you don't have. It's unfortunate. It's that. They have a great leadership.
More agile?
More agile, more realistic. They don't beat around the bush. They don't waste time in bureaucracy. It's straightforward. This is what it takes for us to be a prosperous country. Let's go do it.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. There are some nice paper. If anyone is interested, you can find them on the internet. It's amazing, the Singapore story, the Australia and Finland in terms of education. Skillings differs, but Australia was leading because I carry an Australian passport. I'm always interested in reading more about Australia.
You're an Aussie, this is why. Okay.
I am an Aussie, yes. So I have also always an emotional interest there. Any question on this slide or before we move?
Well, I just want to tell everyone that you can just do the same thing that I'm doing. Just if you would like, you can raise your hand and open your mic or your camera and ask your question. Or if you prefer to type them on the chat conversation part, also feel free. We want to have this session as much interactive and engaging as possible. So don't shy, just hammer Harb with your question.
This is the slide I was mentioning, is about the new wages, and if you look at the far right, as we see computing topping all others in terms of pay scales, and it's still the case, and it's gonna remain the case for the future, for the foreseeable future at least. A huge shortage of data science, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. A huge demand and shortage, and hence comes the high pay. Business and healthcare is still not bad, also, so they're still at a relatively high also demand. Management and leadership, you'll be surprised. It's a very high demand there also. So. Now this what I mentioned earlier in the presentation is basically it's not enough to be a subject matter expert in our area of expertise. It's not enough to bring more engineer, for example, a corporation to bring more engineer, or for a university to increase the number of art graduates to address the supply shortage or the demand for particular engineering. What's more and more we see from experience, I will share some of my experience with Microsoft also, is that more of the soft skill requires. I put numbers on those skills on purpose. So this is, if you want to take it, is by order of priority. Creativity comes number one, critical thinking comes number two, and socio-emotional intelligence, or what they call EQ. So we have the IQ, EQ, and the SQ. SQ is for more the religious side of thing. These are so okay. I missed on number 6. It's collaboration. Number 6 is missing from there. It's collaboration. So these are very important skills to acquire. Unfortunately, you don't find them offered in any educational institution. I find now online some design thinking courses being offered, but basically these come from experience, from learning on the job, and it comes also from years of experience. You cannot acquire them immediately in a year or 2 time. They come from experience. In Microsoft, for example, we emphasize a lot of 70% of the learning comes from the field, from the job. So being on the job, interacting with other colleagues, that collaboration and communication across group, you know, it gives you a lot of learning on the job, and throughout the years you tend to accumulate those experiences. But for your chance to increase in any corporate world, especially big corporation, soft skills is a must. It's not an option anymore, honestly. I have done hundreds of interviews for the last 15 years in Microsoft. And then the first thing I look at is not the resume. I'll get the resume, I'll skim it. Usually it takes me to read the resume between 2 to 3, 4 minutes at maximum. And then I can get the gist of what that candidate has, and then I leave the rest for the interview. Just on what I look at in the interview, most of all, and my number one, and I give it a weight of 70%, is basically attitude. How that candidate can cope under stress, the communication style they have, how they approach problems, how they behave when they are high and relaxed, and how they behave under pressure. All those variables I will test in the interview, and this will be the decisive for me to say hire or no hire for a candidate. I don't care about how reputable the university he or she has graduated from. It doesn't, because we hired in the past from reputable universities. Unfortunately, the lack of couldn't fill the lack of experience there. This is very important. What I'm inviting you to do is that a lot of individual effort has to be done from you. A lot of research, study, reading papers, doing some online courses to keep your skills sharpened. As I mentioned earlier, this is a long life journey and never stop. I have been studying since I graduated, actually. Never stop. Every month or so, I have mandatory courses from the company that every individual, not only me, every employee in Microsoft will have a monthly learning activity. Could vary from 30 minutes to 14 hours. It depends on how complex, and sometimes it go to between 4 to 6 weeks, and you get diploma. We have affiliation with the School of Economy in London, with INSEAD in France, and sometimes we do take 4 to 6 weeks courses, and we get badges. We post it on LinkedIn when we finish those courses. So it never stops. And then on personal, other than what the company mandates on us, part of staying skilled is also you have to do a huge effort in terms of individual effort yourself. You need to look what your current job or your future job you aspire to, what kind of skills required, and you need to go and learn those skills, acquire them. This is a crucial. Honestly, this is a survival game for any person who wants to stay on the job, whether working for a company or having a small business. It doesn't matter. This is a survival game, and competition is high. We see, as I mentioned on the slide, for the northern and southern hemisphere, you have an influx of a huge population coming from the Indian subcontinent. Is a huge. Talking India, 1.3 billion population, very high skilled people, extremely high skilled, hard worker. Anyone who work with the Indians, you understand what I'm talking about. And you have Pakistani, 200 million, Pakistan, Bangladesh, close to 100 million, a huge population in that part of the world. And small part, geographically, is very small part of the world, very small, but yet they have a huge talent, cool talent. But what I mentioned, their challenge is, and if you look, is also the quality of skill is not that high. So for us in a population in Lebanon, like of 5 million, is honestly what will set us to compete with this group of workforce is how much you work on yourself, individual effort you put, online study, and the like, is very crucial to survive in the workplace. And I'm talking from a long experience. Yes.
You mentioned that you look into soft skills when you're interviewing a candidate, and that you want to know different aspects of those skills. Would you actually probe your candidate in order to understand? Is there a kind of scenario that you follow? Like, everyone puts their best in an interview. So what would be maybe the tricks, even though this is not the topic of our talk today, but it might be useful for our senior students or for young alumni who just graduated. This might help them into really nailing their next job.
Yeah, look, first is, and as a big corporation, HR has done a good job internally. We have an application, internal application, that you can go and put of what you're looking. For example, they have grouped the question, for example, critical thinking, let's say, creativity, emotional intelligence. And we have set of those questions, multiple questions, and then you go and pick which category you want to interview, and it automatically generate for you a set of questions. It generates quite a lengthy number of questions, difficult to go through in 1 hour. So what I usually do is I pick and choose for every category. I choose like 2-3 questions maximum, because what I want to do is not do the questioning for the sake of questioning. I want to give the candidate the time to answer and take her time to answer. And this is while the candidate is talking and answering, this is where I can start getting glimpses of her character and her attitude. And what I usually do is I create my interview into 3 sections. The first is I tell the candidate, you have 10 minutes. Tell me about yourself, about your career, and career. Some candidates, like, they have 15, 20 years. I don't want to go back. I say maximum 5 years back. But tell me about yourself. Tell me yourself. And then after those 10 minutes, I do like between 30 to 40 minutes of Q&A. And then the last, I leave like 5 minutes for the candidate if they have question, clarification they want to do. And this is basically from those 3 sections I drive my interview. and I've been doing this format for many years, I'll be able. Sometimes, honestly, I don't let my Q&A go beyond 7-10 minutes out of courtesy. I don't want to kill it immediately, but I can tell the candidate is done. My tips and tricks on top of my head now quickly is honestly be yourself. This is because what the company is looking for is, and the candidate is, they want you, if they say hire, is they want the character that they saw in the interview. And if you're faking it, you cannot fake it for too long. And then I've seen people that get hired by good impression on the interview, they have mastered the interview, but then later in a year time they were let go. So be yourself. So, and then the hiring manager, and usually you go into multiple interviews. When I joined Microsoft in January 2006, I went from September to January into interviews. I done 8 interviews at that time. It took me from September, I started the interview, January they said okay, and February I signed the contract in 2006. So it can take sometimes. It can be challenging, but sometimes some candidates they can fake it, and they can get to it. But honestly, they don't survive. I've seen people like 3 months after the hire they let go. Some after 1 year. So number one, back to the tricks or tips is be yourself. Prepare well in terms of what value add you can bring as a candidate for the company. Because as I was saying, in the current day is the company, all corporations are fighting for talent. And now if you really have some skills, some value add to bring to the corporation, you want to make them very clear, you know, and you want to tell why you have those skills and how you acquired those skills and what value add you bring and what gap you can cover or bridge in the corporation itself by if they hire you. So this is very important, to be really bold, but not ego. So we need to be careful to keep our ego in check and balance. This is very important. But also be bold and be proud of what you value add you're bringing into the corporation. This is very important. And also you want to show that you're a team player, you know, you have a good communication skills, and you're not stuck into one single view. You have an open mindset. It's very important to differentiate between fixed mindset and growth mindset. This is big in corporate America specifically. Is the growth mindset. So how open you are. So those skills you want to show also that you understand what these skills are. You have acquired a couple of them. So this is honestly the tips and tricks. Do not memorize. Be able to really put what we like is the storytelling about the candidate. How you can tell your story. And from that storytelling, I can tell if this candidate can bring and add value to the team or not. So stay away from memorization. Stay away. Keep your ego in check and balance. Be yourself, and write a story. It's good to tell a story about yourself. Write it, practice it, and tell the story.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I hope we will help job seekers nail their interviews.
Yeah. So this slide, what I say is what we need to do. So, and this is what I mean. I mean here government, education institutions alike, is the community as overall, in order to address that skills gap. Is so I put 3 bullet points: speed up experiential learning. So now I gave an example about the forecasting and how finance and how machine learning can improve this. So this is experimentation. People learn a skill, they experiment, and then they come up with a new way of doing things. The second point is, this is very important, and I also spoke about it earlier, is the importance of the individual. So it's shifting the focus from institution to individual. And I gave a couple of examples on that, how the individual effort needs to be done, how institutions need to look at the individual and growing that individual instead. what we found in the classical world of teaching is basically a professor come into a class, whether in a K-12 or in a high ed, come to class, deliver the lecture, gone, you know, top student will absorb the lecture content, and then they can study well and they can deliver well. But those that are in the middle that need, you know, some particular guidance or special guidance, but they can aspire and they can grow and they can succeed, they are left, you know. So this is what we call personalized learning. You know, this is very crucial in the classroom. It's very important aspect. We're focusing in Microsoft, you know, during my discussion with Ministry of Education when I travel across the region, is I emphasize a lot this with leadership in any country, education leadership in any country, that teaching has to be individualized, has to be personalized. Also, the third point I mentioned it throughout my presentation is here, you know, big corporation, they have the budget, they have the money to keep their workers' skills. As I mentioned in Microsoft, we have a monthly training, mandatory training. Like this is not something you can miss. But if you look at smaller business where they don't have the budget, you know, and the profit is not that high in order to take part of that profit in order to invest it back into their skilled worker, or those senior people also that they're old now and they're not confident if they're gonna go do that digital transformation and walk that digital transformation journey or not. So these are the people we need also, and as government, as a community responsible, we need to look at them and skill them and not to leave them behind, because this has impact not only on the individual that are left behind, but on the economy overall and on the development of any country or any society. Any questions here? Okay.
None so far.
We're done. So probably we'll leave it for some interaction, questions, feedback.
Of course. We actually received questions on the forms, the registration form. We have a question from Samar. Samar, please just unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Samar.
I would love to turn on my video, but I look awful.
Don't worry. I read your comment earlier.
I will introduce a little bit myself. I was living in the UAE. I recently moved back to Lebanon, 3 or 4 months ago. So I was heading the marketing department in an IT company in the UAE. And I moved back for some personal reasons. So now I'm back to Lebanon just before Corona. So I wasn't affected. Yeah. And now I'm a group marketing manager for ICC Group here in Lebanon.
Okay.
So I was interested in participating in this webinar. Of course, I am an alumni of NDU, and I studied in the UAE in the University of Wollongong. So I had an MBA as well. So I was interested in this webinar because it's talking about the skill gap. And I noticed that when I was leading the marketing department back in the UAE, I noticed that the new joinees, or if you want, the new generation, they do not want to really learn and go do these trainings. So they are more like lazy. So you feel like you need to like take them by the hand, and this is how it needs to be done. Otherwise, they do not invest in themselves, like go and read or participate in webinars or register for an online course. So I'm feeling a little bit that the new generation want like easy money, no hard work. So I'm not sure how this is like. It's contradicting a little bit, like in Microsoft, because it's mandatory. So we are forced to do it. Otherwise, we will not be working at Microsoft, for example. But in general, like the new generation, and even here in Lebanon, I noticed it like within the organization, they are like lazy, like they don't want to learn anymore. Like, خلاص, we took our BA degree, our masters, we have the best degree with us, and that's it. And they want just the best work, the best income, and so on and so forth. So, and just like, if you can help me understand a little bit what is happening here, like, and this is based on my experience, and it's been like almost 9 years of experience, and all these new generation that I worked with, they all have this same common trait. Like, they just want to come to work 9 to 5. If 10 minutes after 5, no, you have to pay me, and it's too much. Like, the mentality has totally changed. I'm not sure how this is like applicable. Like, for me personally, I always follow up, and I read courses or participate in certificates and events and whatever. So to increase like my knowledge about the industry, what is changing, like new terms, new way of doing things. So by default, it's coming from me, because I am a person who is like dedicated to improving myself. But others are not like this. So how do you tackle that when you have a team where you need to keep on pushing, go? So how do you explain this idea for me a little bit? I'm not HR, I'm not psychological. Like, I'm not, I didn't study psychology or anything to be able to deal at that level. So that's why I was interested to join this webinar and try to understand a little bit what is happening with the new generation and how you can push them to it, like to upskill themselves, like to go and really invest in themselves. Because if you notice, if you're living in UAE, I guess, so if you notice in UAE, like other nationalities, let's take it like Lebanese versus Indian, for example. Like the Indian and the IT industry, they are like top notch. They always like to get like the latest certificate. They know every every software around the world. But compared to the Lebanese, I feel we are becoming like we're not really competitive with them. So what's happening?
Some of the sign I tell you, I experience even in Dubai. It's usually when you live in a society that's affluent.
Okay.
It's usually you get this is from the generation that are spoiled. You know, they're. So this is one behavior, but it's not across the board. But I've noticed that behavior and observed it with affluent families. Is the kids tend to depend on the parents' wealth, and then they're usually spoiled, and then with their group of peers, the same life. I think this is hopefully. I'm hoping that this will be a phase. It might last a few years, but I hope it's a phase. Otherwise, they will be trampled upon. And as you mentioned, as the Indian subcontinent is producing very hungry youth for learning and for education, very highly skilled people, extremely highly skilled and hard worker. You put someone coming from India or Pakistan, 14 hours a day work, he will not budge down. He will not complain. Even if you do it consistently, regularly, it's not like only one weekend every couple of months. If you do it every day, and you make someone coming from India or Pakistan work 12, 14 hours a day, he will never complain, right?
Yes, correct. This is the same like scenario we used to face. Like whenever we try to hire, for example, Lebanese people, because I was in a position to help like at least push CVs for Lebanese people and so on. We always get like this disappointment when you find like other nationalities like Filipinos, Pakistani, Indians. They are really, really hard worker. Like you really, when you invest in them, you really find results.
Yeah, because they have purpose. You know, they have purpose. First, they want to get out of their poverty. Second, they want to grow. Third, they want to imitate people from their neighborhood or from their family that have been successful by studying and by migrating and working in a wealthy country like either Gulf or Europe, or you see a lot of Indian in Australia, in Canada, in America. Our CEO is Indian. Google CEO is Indian. Adobe CEO is Indian.
You're right.
Pepsi. No, the lady, she's Indian too, I think.
Yeah,
I think it's not a matter of nationality. It's a matter of
it's not.
mindset.
It's a hunger, mindset. That's why
and
I said
it is a generation thing. Samar, Anna, what I would advise you, because this is something that has been recurrent, and you have different levels of the generation gap. Check out the Generation Z and the workplace. It will tell you a little bit of what motivates the new generation, which is the Generation Z, and the fact that they are individualistic, much more than a team player. And you might find very interesting insights that might help you deal with the situation and adapt, because there's always a shift between generation and generation, and we all need to find the link that would make the workplace more as a result-oriented and, of course, empathic and all of that.
Yeah, because like not all organizations are really investing in providing some spare time or allowing employees to go study or take, let's say, 30 minutes to watch a certain webinar to upskill. So it's actually the process of learning is, if you want, it's only implemented in very large organizations like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, LinkedIn. These two huge, they have huge budgets for that. But if you go to other organizations that are now like forming like 90% of the economy, that are startups. So in these environments, like you don't have time even to learn or upskill. Like they hire and fire. So maybe the rise of startups is causing this. I'm not sure. Like,
no, look, it won't cause it, but the startup, because as you mentioned, is limited budget. They want to survive. They want the best to help them. The challenge is in individual effort, and I did talk about it into one of the slides in the deck. Is very important as an individual to realize first, to understand that there is a huge skills gap. And then assess where do you want to fit in those, and what are the kind of skills I need to acquire. Are my current skill enough? Can I survive with the current skill? How often I need to go study and learn a new skill, or basically keep my current skill sharpened? I've been in developer. I've done development when I graduated from NDU for almost 11, 12 years, pure development, and then I moved into consultancy. If you ask me now, I want to do some development, I need probably to go reskill myself, and I'm not sure if I can find, the time. Not the time, is the energy for it now, because I have done into completely different track. But it took me. I've worked in Australia as a freelancer, developing software for huge companies, especially in the financial market, for 9 periods in a row. And then what kept me is the skills. I was putting a lot of effort in the afternoon and the evening after I finish my work, is into keep my skills developing, reading about the latest, keeping myself updated. At that time in the mid-90s in Australia, internet was still starting, and you do dial up on the internet. So the learning was, you have still to go to the library, buy books, and learn from those books. You have to put the effort. I mean, as individual, if they don't realize it, they're gonna be trampled upon. It's unfortunate.
Because
the effort from both, from your side, Samar, and from their side. And I'm sure one of the tricks could be, you probably have your weekly status meeting or something like that. You can take an opportunity of that meeting in order to show them some kind of presentation, or just put on the table the problem and probe them into working things better and all of that. The new generation is much more كتير هيك driven by values, and I don't want to say El Dorado, but what matters is really the social good, the work-life balance, idealistic in one word.
Yes.
So and they fight for their right. And what you want them to do is to protect them, but they're not seeing it as you protecting them by driving them. And no, you have to stay a little bit more to drive and to put that on the job, because you need to deliver. And it's not about a 9-to-5 job kind of thing.
It's never like
the give and take is important. And I think we need to work on ourselves to be to adapt. It's just like an electricity plug, يمكن.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like as a marketeer, okay, so it's been for maybe for the past 7 or 8 years, digital marketing is growing. Every day new stuff happening. So when you see someone now like joining, for example, my team, and he is supposedly SEO specialist or a digital marketeer, or I don't know, like when you find that the really basic, and I'm not sure you onboard people, and then let's say, please go fix our Google My Business. They don't know how to put themselves that as owner, or and there are stuff that surprise you sometimes. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
Like no, you're making complete sense. What I can advise you is during the interview, so you can avoid that experience when you hire. So when you're doing the onboarding, mean you have hired. What I do sometimes in my interview, when I shortlist, like let's say 2 or 3 candidates, what I do sometimes, if I wanna make sense and then make sure which candidate to select, I give them some homework, and I give them like few days or a week. Do that homework and come back to me, and they come back, and based on that homework, I can further go deep into their skills and what they can do. So probably you can apply this in the interview. There is nothing wrong, and no one will tell you no if you give certain assignment to your finalist, the shortlisted candidate. I do sometimes. I do it sometimes when I'm clear, or I have 2 candidates that I still didn't figure out which one to hire. I give an assignment. I give them a few days or a week maximum, and then based on
sorry for interrupting, but maybe the problem is actually their will to learn or to upskill. And when you face that the will, like if the will is not there, so whatever you do, even if you and if you show them how it is done, you give them all the resources, you share with them these webinars, these certificates, upskill yourself, you feel that sometimes the will, it's not there to upskill themselves. So sometimes I'm not sure, and these are scenarios that I have faced throughout my career. Like I've never, to be honest, like met someone who's really like eager to learn, except few people, and it happened they were in different nationalities. I'm not just comparing nationalities, but happened to be from other nationalities, not from Lebanese, for example. If we are saying that we are Lebanese and we're trying to support the Lebanese community and so on and so forth. So it happened, maybe in my experience, I've never met someone who was like, even if I taught them how to do it, they go and do it and improve their skills. But you find later on, after 1 year, that they didn't learn it. And sometimes I don't know how it is now. I know now that job market is a mess. There is a huge skill gap, and especially in robotics and automation, especially here in Lebanon, as the Lebanese engineers and so on also are lacking the knowledge in automation. So, for example, one of our entities at ICC Group, they are a software house. Okay, they have an academy. They even hire people from Lebanese universities to train them, to pay them, and to, let's say, shape them in order to be ready if they need someone, let's say, later on. So this is what the company has did as an initiative, because the generation is not like they come out of themselves and they want to learn, unless the company did so, and they are paying them, come and learn, I will teach you, and I will have an job opportunity ready for you. No one is doing it. You got my point? Yani we are lacking those people who just go all by themselves to learn and go above and beyond to succeed and earn money and reach high level. So I feel this
2 points here. It's from experience, sir. So I'm not saying I know it all, but from experience. First is that's why I mentioned in my interview, I put as a weight 70% on attitude. It's very, very important to check to do an attitude check on your candidates before you say hire. This is very important. This is, for me, honestly, it's 70% when I say, and I leave 30% for skills and, IQ and EQ and the rest. Attitude is very important. So this fixed mindset versus a growth mindset is very important to make sure you checked it before you say hire. The second one, I agree with you, and I told you, not every company, it costs the company, any company, a lot of money to hire a candidate and then to train them, because usually what we say, the ROI, the return on investment is usually 18 months, so a year and a half. So no corporation now, giving the competitive landscape. So Microsoft, how we compete, for example, with Amazon, how we compete with Google, and how they compete with us. I don't have the luxury of the time to wait 18 months to train someone, to hire and train him for 18 months. I want someone who has done his training, his skilling, everything, and he's ready to throw him in the deep immediately after hire. We do onboarding few days and that's it, and then go figure it out yourself. The cost is very high in terms of ROI on companies if I'm gonna wait 18 months for my candidate to be ready.
Okay. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you
for your questions. I think we don't have any additional questions. I would like to thank all those who joined us. Harb, thank you very, very much.
Pleasure.
And as you know, the session has been recorded and will be on NDU YouTube next week. Please, if you have any questions for our alumni expert for today, feel free to email at alumni.talks@ndu.edu.lb. And on that, I invite everyone to watch next week's talk. The first one is on the motherhood superpowers with alumna Yasmina Aude on Wednesday, followed on Monday, talking about updating our skills with a hosted session from Snapchat that addressed Decode Your Retail Strategy, how omni-channel retailers can unlock their full potential on Snapchat. I thank everyone again, and I wish all of you a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nasreen.
Thank you.